I'd never really ever considered how that would intersect data and international relations. I mean, it seems pretty obvious when you put it like that, but at the time, sort of didn't think that that would be something that the ABS would even be doing. So I was fortunate enough to move into a role there. I went back to then study my master's in international business, which then led me to Global Voices. So I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to be a Global Voices scholar, and then sort of became involved in the organisation, and then led sort of student delegations through that. And the opportunity to see how some of these large multilateral organisations work, whether that be the IMF, World Bank, the UN, the OECD, and sort of realising the importance of these institutions. So from when they were founded, I guess, post-World War II, and sort of seeing how maybe at the current time, the trust in them and the use of them has probably waned a little bit. And I just sort of see that there's a lot of value, particularly in young people, becoming engaged in these institutions, understanding how they work, and the value of their work has probably never been more critical than now. So I think that continues to drive that passion and that interest sort of in the international space, and collaborating with our neighbours and our colleagues around the world.
Great, thanks for that. And I completely agree in terms of languages being kind of a conduit into those careers, kind of in both of your scenarios. I'm going to pass on to Rana and then Anthony. I was going to ask, what do you wish you had known at the start of your career?
Well, I had very limited information about the UN careers when I started, and I wish, because when I started, I couldn't apply for junior professionals roles, and definitely I wish I knew it earlier, and I was applying for the junior professional roles, which is a great opportunity for people from many countries. The other thing that I wish I knew, and I was looking for it, was in the beginning, I got the advice that I need to know the languages, the UN languages. And I had the opportunity to know Arabic, but learning French was always a problem for me. So if I knew earlier, I was starting earlier, and I was learning it better, because it's one of the main languages, actually.
That's great. I must admit, I only did French for 1 year, and I couldn't hack it. So if you can do it, that is, yeah, definitely kudos. Anthony, can I pass over to you?
Sure. I guess, first of all, I want to preface this by saying, you know, I recognize that I'm in the luxurious position of having entered the job market when the notion of a global pandemic and a recession were inconceivable. But if I were to not put too delicate a spin on it, I would say, don't expect to land your dream job right from the outset or straight out of university. There are so many pathways into the job and career that you envisage for yourself. I applied for DFAT in my final year of uni, and like most applicants, I was unsuccessful. At the time, I was really disappointed, because I considered that initial rejection to be a firmly closed door. But really, what it did was give me an opportunity to canvass what other experiences there were out there. I moved home, I got a job in a legal profession, and it gave me a means to consider these other options, which ultimately led to postgraduate study abroad. And that in turn led to a job in the press office with the European Union in Brussels, where I was based for 3 years. And it was at that point, after a couple of years in Brussels, that I decided, you know, maybe it's time to come back to Australia. I reapplied for the DFAT grad program and was ultimately successful. So just understand that sometimes these things take a bit of time. It's for a reason that DFAT's grad program, like a lot of other government grad programs, accept applicants or accept applications from those who have completed their most recent university degree within 5 years. So that goes to show that DFAT, like other government departments, places a high priority on experience that an individual gains, whether that's in academia or in another professional workplace. My second point follows on from this, and that's to canvass the breadth of opportunities that exist beyond what I would consider to be the traditional international mainstays like the DFATs and the UN agencies. And it's great, the sort of breadth of experience that you have from the speakers here tonight. If I use, just as a quick example, my time at our embassy in Sweden, you know, I was working on a trade and investment agenda, and the Australian companies that I worked most closely with, Telstra, Telstra had a really large presence in Scandinavia because they're working on 5G rollout. So they were working with Nokia in Finland and Ericsson in Sweden. And then the number of Australian companies that have substantial investments in Europe in the agricultural sector, like Treasury Wine Estates. These are two Melbourne-based companies that have a larger presence in Sweden than the Australian embassy in terms of personnel that they bring over from Australia. So just being aware of the breadth of opportunities that exist, particularly in the private sector, in a commercial hub such as Melbourne, that can in turn lead you to join DFAT or another organisation that you have your heart set on at a later date.
Yeah, I certainly agree with what you're saying, Anthony, in terms of that initial job that, you know, one lands directly out of uni. It's not static. You know, one can change, right. and often it sounds like those things allow you to build the experience to kind of move further into
Absolutely.
those professions like DFAT. So lastly, can I ask Louise and then Ian, you know, given we're living in such interesting times at the moment, what do you think the future of international careers looks like?
Louise, do you want to go first?
Do you want to kick us off, Ian, and then we can go?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thanks again, Casey. And could I begin by saying Anthony's made a very good observation there. There are many pathways into international careers, and not just the traditional ones that many of us think about. For example, it comes to mind when I was serving in West Africa, I was surprised to find there are 200 Australian mining companies in West Africa. They're not just employing miners, they're employing Australian anthropologists, Australian lawyers, a whole host of people with different backgrounds. Australian banks are right through Asia, and they employ people with a variety of skills and not just in the traditional area. One of the fastest growing employers in Melbourne, again, a surprise to me, that I heard in recent years is the security industry. Now, they're just not employing well-muscled men standing outside the building looking menacing, but they employ people, particularly with IT skills. And we've just heard recently in the last few months that the Australian government is going to beef up dramatically in terms of numbers people with IT skills. So there's lots of opportunities, I think, for graduates seeking international career paths beyond the sort of traditional openings that you instinctively think about. Now, the path I took is that, and you know, why do you take paths? Why do you come to an intersection, you go left instead of right? You apply for jobs, you succeed in one, but you don't succeed in many others. And the one you succeed in sends you in a certain direction. Whereas perhaps one that came through a couple of weeks later might have sent you in another one. I went as a volunteer, and Australian Volunteers International is still based in Melbourne. It's been there since the 1950s in a sense thousands of Australians. And today, right now, you can apply to go as an Australian volunteer. And it's not just Australian Volunteers International, but there are many organisations that send volunteers to work internationally. All the churches have volunteers. World Vision has volunteers. Oxfam has volunteers. There's many opportunities to go and work as a volunteer. The UN has a UN volunteers program. The UN has a junior professional officers program. Australia, and Anthony, you might update us here. Some years ago, you had the Australian Youth Ambassadors program. Is there something contemporary that covers opportunities for young graduates to work? Now, of course, many graduates or many students take the opportunity to travel. And in the course of that travel, they get a job here, they get a job there. And somewhat surprisingly, they get jobs in UN offices. They knock on someone's door, they know somebody. They stay with a family friend who knows somebody else, and they find a 3-month opening working in a UN office in Burkina Faso, Mongolia, in New York. These things happen. So there are opportunities. You have to dare to take the risk. But if you want to pursue an international career, given the uncertainties of the times we're in this moment with COVID-19 and the lockdown, but you have to run a risk and not necessarily look for the glamorous openings in Geneva or in Rome or in New York, but head off to rural Bangladesh like I did for 1 year, a 1-year contract. And then what turned into 1 year took more than 30 years as a career UN staff officer.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Casey. Yeah.
That's certainly some good advice. And I must say, I didn't know that about the security industry in Korea.
Extraordinary, really. Who would have thought?
Let's try Louise again. You
yes,
there?
I'm here, Casey. Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. What do I think the future of international careers look like? Well, I'm probably confessing my age a bit, but when I worked at the World Bank, it was in the time when we were looking at Millennium Development Goals. So, needless to say, millenniums come and go. Unfortunately, the SDGs replaced the Millennium Development Goals, and they're out till 2030. So the one thing I'm seeing, which I'm really excited about, is a huge amount of interest from institutions other than development institutions signing up to those SDG indicators. And I feel, even Melbourne Uni, we're signing up to those SDG indicators. So I feel it's a very exciting shift. Most of our staff, most of our students told us when we did the new strategy for the Melbourne Uni last year, they want to see the benefits and the value that we have on our society. And I think it was always important when I worked at the World Bank, but it's becoming very exciting now because a lot more institutions are signing up to it. And so I feel as a student who doesn't know the SDGs, put it this way, you've got to know about the SDGs, I think, to be successful in an international career going forward. And then the second big trend, and I've done a lot of environmental scans and things like that, huge amount of course, a geopolitical movement happening on, particularly in our region, right, in the Asia Pacific. So without even traveling anywhere else, sitting here in Melbourne, in Australia, lots of very interesting opportunities as far as the role of Australia in the Asia Pacific. The development opportunities, trade opportunities, security opportunities, but I think you've got, we're in a very interesting hotspot, I think, of the world. And City of Melbourne is is also very well placed. They're also signing up to the SDG. So we're in a good place, I think. Very interesting opportunities for us all.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. No, I certainly agree in terms of it's useful just for us to note that there are institutions out there, you know, besides the UN that are contributing towards the SDGs, like Louise said. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the mini panel discussion. Thanks again to the speakers for those responses. I'm going to hand over to Matt Tinker. He's an UNAA committee member, and he's going to be our technical moderator for tonight. So he's just going to give us a few details about how the remainder of the webinar is going to be run, and in particular, how the breakout rooms are going to work. So Matt, I'll hand over to you now.